I suppose sometimes I could be a little sadistic when I watch a movie. Sometimes I put on a movie expecting it to be bad just to watch a bad movie. It's weird. I can't be the only one who does that. Maybe I am. I don't know. I was browsing on Amazon and I found The Unnamable. And I thought, this looks awful. I'll give it a shot. And you know what? I got half of a good movie. The Unnamable was released in 1988 and was written by H.P. Lovecraft. I suppose the H.P. Lovecraft might have been the good part of the movie, but it probably was. The movie opens up on this house that's in a cemetery. It's kind of like a dark and stormy night with lightning and thunder. How cliche is that? The movie opens on a house on a cemetery with lightning and thunder, rain, wind and howling, screaming from a room. Yeah, I guess that's pretty cliche when I say it like that. Anyway, whatever's screaming is behind this door. You see this old Geppetto-like man in a weird hat. This guy ends up letting whatever's in there out, and whatever's in there ends up ripping his heart out, so I guess it was a mistake. The next day they take his body out and they bury him in a tomb that's actually right in front of the house. The movie jumps ahead a few hundred years. I think it's a few hundred years. I don't know. It could be the next day. I don't know what it is. It never tells you. It focuses in on these three college kids who are kind of telling a ghost story. The main character here, Carter. I actually really like Carter. I've never seen a character like this in a horror movie before. I wish I saw more like this character. He's kind of a know-it-all bookworm, kind of a really smug character. Not a very likely kind of like a hero of a horror movie. But again, that made this particular movie and this character especially very unique. Anyway, he's telling a story about this creature that's so awful it can only be called the Unnamable. It spent so much time locked up in a house staring out of a window that the window itself actually took on the image of the creature, which already is like this really cool premise for like a horror haunted house type movie. I mean, can you imagine coming across window after window and kind of seeing different, images of whatever's been at that window for a long time? Yeah, already I like the premise. Well, it turns out the Unnamable is the creature that we met in the beginning of the movie, and they're also right out in front of that house. Well, another one of the boys here, Joel, of course, doesn't believe the story, so he wants to stay overnight in the house just kind of for fun. The other two, Howard and Carter here, end up going back to the university. They don't want to go and hang out in the house, but Joel's committed, so he ends up going into the house. So Joel goes into the house alone. He does some exploring. He finds that same door. He opens it, and whatever's inside comes out and kills him. So the next day, Howard goes and finds Carter in the library and says, "Hey, we haven't heard from our friend all night long. We should probably go check on him." Carter, of course, is like, "It's a joke. Who cares?" So while the two of them are having this discussion, next to them in the library are a couple of girls here, Tanya and Wendy, and they're approached by a couple of fraternity jocks, preps, I guess. They're preppy. They're a couple of preppies, I guess. I mean, look how he's dressed. John and Bruce. And these two tell the girls that if you come with us to this haunted house, we can get you into a sorority. And everybody knows that every single girl in every single college across every campus in the United States just want to become sorority. So, of course, these two girls, they're interested. Well, later on that night, we meet Bruce and John again by the haunted house. And it turns out that they only wanted to bring the girls along to scare them, to try to sleep with them. So it's a typical horror movie trope so far. You got a haunted house, you got somebody who's already died inside, and you got a couple of horny guys trying to get laid inside. Coupled with the fact that we already have this Carter character, this kind of bookworm know-it-all, I'm down. This seems like a fun ride for me. So the four of them go into the house, and they end up hanging out here in this looks like a living room, kind of swapping ghost stories. In the meantime, we still have Howard trying to convince Carter to go back to the house to check on their friend Joel. And since they haven't heard from their friend in almost 24 hours, Carter agrees to go back to the house to check on him. Well, by this time, our group of four who's already at the house kind of get bored swapping ghost stories, so they start to explore the house. And this is where the movie finally starts to lose me. I was on board on this movie up until this point. They start exploring around the house. They start to get lost and turned around. I swear to you, the rest of this entire movie is just them wandering around these narrow hallways. This movie goes from hallway to hallway to hallway. Every time you see a character, they're in a hallway. I mean, you see these two characters, they're lost in a hallway. You see these two characters, they're also lost in a hallway. We go back to these characters, they're lost in a hallway. The whole movie, you're lost. You don't know where anybody's going. You don't know where anybody came from. You don't know where they should go or where they've been. It's just a really confusing way to kind of move the story forward. Well, somehow John and Wendy find a room that's large enough for them to actually start making out, and they found some candles too. And while they're making out, they find Joel's head. Wendy ends up escaping, but John gets killed by the Unnamable. So now we have Wendy running around these halls, freaked out. And somehow Tanya and Bruce also got split up, but I'm not quite sure how really that happened. I mean, they're just walking through hallways from one hallway to the next, and somehow they're lost, and they lost each other. And it doesn't make any sense, but the movie just keeps going forward as if the previous scene made sense. So Tanya gets to the front door, and just before escaping, she ends up seeing Howard and Carter, who had just arrived, and she faints. After they wake her up, Tanya tells them that some weird things are going on. So Howard and Tanya decide to go and investigate while Carter stays behind and reads these books that he found in the library. So now we have an introduction of new characters into the house, but it's the same situation. So now we have Howard also lost in hallways, going into hallway after hallway after hallway. And the most exciting thing this movie has done in a long time was offer a new setting. Carter in a library reading a book. Otherwise, it's still just a bunch of people stuck in hallways. This movie should have been called The Unnamable Hallway. It should have been called Stuck in a Corridor. Anything that has to do with just hanging out in a hallway. Meanwhile, Wendy's still freaking out in the hallways about John being killed. Then she ends up getting killed herself. And this is either before or after Bruce also got killed. They die, they're in hallways, and it's just Carter reading books in a library, Howard and Tanya wandering through hallways. We get a shot of Carter reading something in a book and getting an aha moment, but we don't quite know what it is. He actually gets up and leaves the house and goes outside to the tomb. He opens it up and walks down. So I guess it's not a tomb, it's like a crypt, because he can go all the way down. What is the difference between a crypt and a tomb? I think a crypt is a bigger tomb, right? I don't know. He walks down into it. So Tanya and Howard, after wandering from hallway to hallway, finally find themselves in a large room, and that's where they meet the Unnamable. I don't know if I like this creature that much. I don't know if I like the makeup effects. I don't know if I like what it looks like. It's just too confusing. It has these weird bat wings coming out of the back, hooves for feet, horns. It's got boobs. There's just too much going on for the eye to really notice what is going on. It's kind of confusing. Whoever was wearing the makeup also was doing the voices. There was no voiceover, there was no post. It was just a human being hissing and howling and screaming. And it just didn't sound scary. It didn't sound menacing. It sounded like a human trying to act like a weird thing. So I wasn't very convinced or very impressed with what the Unnamable actually looked like. And I had to wait a long time to see the Unnamable. This is one of those traditional monster movies that would save seeing the creature all the way to the end of the movie. So when you finally get to see it, that's your moment to be oh, that's what it is. And this movie, I saw it and I was like, that's what it is? It might have been how H.P. Lovecraft wrote it, but I tell you, for an audience nowadays, I didn't feel like it was very entertaining or very interesting. I don't know, maybe I'm spending too much time thinking about what this creature looked like and sounded like, but for waiting for such a long time through such a long and boring middle act, the third act was not a very good payoff. And I guess I'm just coming to terms with that right now. Anyway, at the same time, we still have Carter down in that crypt thing, kind of reading from whatever book he found, the Necronomicon, I guess it was, which summons these branches to kind of come crashing through the room and take the Unnamable away, which is a very Evil Dead 2 ending, but this was written by H.P. Lovecraft. Who knows if he included that to begin with? I don't know. I never read the original book, so I'm not willing to call one movie or the other a ripoff. I don't know. They both did a similar thing. So Tanya and Howard get out of the house. They meet up with Carter, and they walk away. It's got kind of a funny song at the end of the movie that doesn't really match with anything, but a lot of this movie didn't really match with much else anyway, so like I said, the first third of the movie, the first act was really, really good. I like the setup. I like the pacing, actually, and I really liked Carter. He was a very fun character, and I'd like to see more of him, more of characters like him in other movies. The middle act is where the movie fell flat, and the third act did not do much to save it. It was a lot of running around hallways, long and boring sequences. I got lost just in the logic of the movie. Who's where? Who got killed? How did who get killed? I don't know. And then by the third act, the monster wasn't very impressive to me. The movie just kind of petered out, I guess. And it kind of made me think of other movies that maybe had a really good opening act or really good beginning or premise, and then just kind of fell flat with the execution. Probably a lot of M. Night Shyamalan movies do that. I know The Village or The Happening kind of had a good premise, and then nothing really happened from there. I don't know. I mean, what other movies can you think of that had a really good opening or really good premise, and then just kind of fell flat with the execution? Am I being kind of mean on the creature? Is it actually good creature effects, do you think? Am I just kind of being harsh on it because maybe I didn't like the middle of the movie and I was bitter? Leave some comments down below. Let's get this conversation going. And until next time, keep watching movies.